You're watching The Word on Cars. My name's Nish and this is an Audi A4. It may not be a wolf, but it's definitely a surprisingly sporty sheep, as you're about to see. So, the A4 started life off all the way back in 1966 as the Audi 80, and it wasn't until 1994 that Audi introduced the A4 nameplate that we know today. Since then, they've been cranking out new A4s, and these days we're up to the 5th generation, or the B9. Since its release in 2016, the B9 has been offered as either a sedan or estate, which Audi calls the Avant. The A4 was also offered in a few trim levels since its release: the Sport, which was the entry-level model, the S-Line, which this car here is, and is a sportier variant, the Black Edition, which was a blacked-out version of the S-Line, and the All-Road, which is a jacked-up A4 Avant. There was also a lineup of engines ranging from 1.4 to 2 litres for the Australian market in petrol or diesel, and with the option of Audi's all-wheel drive Quattro system for the 2-litre petrol and diesel variants. To complicate matters even further, Audi introduced a new naming convention for the A4 lineup for the 2019 model year, as well as revised front and rear fascias. The new lineup included the 35, the 40 and the 45. The 35 and 40 are available in either petrol or diesel, and the 40 and 45 can also be optioned with Quattro. Audi refreshed the A4 for the 2020 model year with the introduction of the B9.5, which included changes to styling, minor changes on the inside to tech, and changes to the engine lineup, and in 2023 introduced the Dynamic Black, which is based on the S-Line and included black exterior trim and black wheels. From a styling perspective, Audi has taken a different approach to their German competitors and kept things simple. The A4 is for those out there that want a luxury car that doesn't stand out in a crowd. So now that I've given you the 101 on the A4, you're wondering what makes this thing sporty. Let me explain. This A4 S-Line has the most powerful engine offered, the 185 kilowatt, 370 Newton meter 2-litre turbo 4-cylinder and Quattro. That's good enough for 0 to 100 in 5.8 seconds. Now, 5.8 seconds isn't exactly slow by modern standards, but don't expect this thing to win any drag strip runs or set record-breaking lap times. Instead, this thing shines at the traffic light. It'll leave the car next to you quite confused. In terms of front-end styling, the A4 certainly looks sporty in this S-Line guise, thanks to the sportier and sharper bumper bar, which has an integrated splitter down the bottom, vents in these trim pieces on either side, and a fairly substantial grille that says Quattro. The A4 also sports a bonnet that wraps into the fenders, which looks fantastic, and headlamps with integrated daytime running lights. This one doesn't have the Matrix headlamps though, which was an option and part of the Technique package. The back end of the A4 S-Line carries the same level of simplicity and sportiness thanks to the sharp lines and edges. Back here you get good-looking tail lamp bezels with daytime running lights. There's a rear camera tucked away. It's a basic system in this particular car, which will show you what's behind you with grid lines. Audi did offer the parking assistance package, which included cameras all around and automated parking. The A4 also gets twin exhaust tips that add to the sportiness back here, although it definitely doesn't sound sporty. And lastly, this A4 does have a few accessories, this Audi carbon fiber ducktail spoiler and aftermarket diffuser, so don't expect to find these on the back end of a stock A4 S-Line. Now, cargo space-wise back here, there's 480 litres, which is plenty of space for 2 large suitcases. You can increase this to 965 litres by dropping the rear seats, which are a 60-40 split, which can only be done through the interior of the car. There are no latches in the boot. There's also a rear pass-through for longer items. You can also lock the seats with the physical key if you're handing over the car to a valet to keep what you have in the cargo area protected. That aside, you get netted storage areas on either side of the cargo area with a 12-volt power outlet, bag hangers and cargo tie-downs. There's no additional space under the floor, unfortunately. That's taken up by the spare wheel. Moving over to the side of the A4, it's pretty much just a sedan, although Audi has spruced up the S-Line variant with side skirts that aren't very obvious and 19-inch RS wheels on all 4 corners. Brakes-wise, the A4 gets 4-piston calipers up front and single pistons on the back for added stopping power, although they aren't all that pretty. The A4 also gets mirrors with integrated LED turn signals. This one has optional carbon fiber mirror caps, a belt line that runs along the edge of the bonnet and into the rear tail lamps, and subtle crease lines at the bottom of the doors for styling. This one also gets Quattro decals from Audi's option list. Lastly, to finish off the side of the A4 and to let everyone know what this thing is, Audi's dropped S-Line badges on the fenders. Now, getting into the A4 is nice and easy. Walk up with the key fob, wrap your hand around the handle, which unlocks the car, and away you go. This same functionality is carried into the back doors as well, which is convenient. To lock the car when you're done, touch the marked area on the handle. That will lock the car. You get 2 key fobs with the A4, basic functionality to lock, unlock, pop the boot, and a hidden physical key for emergencies. You can also roll the windows up or down and vent the sunroof using the key fob. Opening the doors to the A4, you get plenty of space for both front and rear passengers to hop in. Front passengers get beautifully illuminated brushed aluminium scuff guards, while the peasants in the back get nothing. So, stepping in, there's certainly a lot to be said about the quality in here. It's not a beautiful interior, instead it's smart. It definitely looks and feels premium. There's leather and brushed aluminium everywhere. There are some plastic surfaces, but nothing in here feels cheap. In terms of seating, this A4 gets the optional Napa leather seats with embossed S logos for that added touch of sportiness. The seats are electrically adjustable and even have thigh extensions to get real comfortable in here. In terms of headroom, there's lots of that too, so no issues if you're taller than the average. Now, technology-wise in here, there's Audi's MMI or multimedia interface, which is dated by modern standards in the pre-refreshed A4s. There's no touchscreen, it's not configurable, so it's one source of information at a time. Instead, you get an 8.3-inch screen and a rotary dial to control it with quick access buttons around it to get to radio, phone, navigation, media, the usual stuff. The top of the radio dial can also be used to type in, say, a destination into the navigation, one letter at a time, which works pretty well actually. Surprisingly, the A4 does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but again, you're stuck with the rotary dial to navigate the screen. Post-refresh, or A4s made after 2020 got a 10.1-inch touchscreen to bring it up to snuff. This A4 also has the standard 10-speaker system, which sounds fine, but there is an optional 19-speaker B&O stereo for the audiophiles out there. There's also a row of touch-sensitive buttons for radio presets. Slide your finger over the buttons, and you can see what your presets are on screen, which is a nifty idea. I like. In between all of this, there's the climate control, which has two rotary dials with screens inside to set and display the temperature. This A4 is equipped with the optional heated seats, 3 levels of heating. There's also row brush aluminium toggles that feel fantastic. You can slide your finger over these toggles, which displays the functions for each toggle, which is very cool. Below this, there's a row of buttons for drive modes, efficiency, comfort, auto, which works out the right mode based on how you're driving, dynamic and individual, auto start stop to save fuel, traction control, park assist, which activates the front camera and parking sensors with audible and visual warnings through the infotainment screen, and a button to turn off the infotainment screen. Now, this A4 has the optional virtual cockpit, which is a digital instrument cluster. Audi rocked the industry when they rolled this out because it's so good. There's lots of information on screen, and you can control phone, audio, and navigation using buttons on the steering wheel. Its best feature, though, is how configurable it is. You can choose from multiple views, including a full screen view of navigation. The A4 also gets a decent heads-up display that gives you speed, turn-by-turn navigation, and traffic sign recognition. Driver assistance-wise, though, this A4 doesn't have much. We have blind spot monitoring integrated into the mirrors to tell you when there's a car in the blind spot, which also lights up the doors when you're about to step out of the A4 to warn you of oncoming traffic. Emergency braking both front and rear, and basic cruise control. A4's equipped with the assistance package, got all the additional safety tech. Now, being an S-Line, this A4 gets some additional goodies. You got a flat bottom steering wheel with perforated leather on either side that looks fantastic. You get the same leather on the gear lever as well. The gear lever itself looks good and is easy to use, forward for reverse, back for neutral and drive, and a button for park. Around this, there's a button for the auto hold function, which holds a car at a traffic light, parking brake, and volume control for the infotainment system, which also lets you toggle between audio tracks and turn off the system. As part of the S-Line package, there's also suede look inserts on the doors, brushed aluminium pedals, adjustable headrests for the front, and a black headliner. This car also has the optional electric sunroof. Now, storage-wise in here, there's 2 cup holders on the center console and a little storage in front of these that includes a 12-volt power outlet. Moving further down, there's a dedicated spot for the Audi key fob, which is handy, as well as storage under the armrest, which slides back and forth. In here, there are 2 USB-A ports and an audio input. There's bottle holders in both doors with additional storage behind these, a small storage compartment for the owner's manual in the driver's footwell, and a decent sized glove box which is home to a DVD player and a few SD card slots that can be used to load up media, and a slot for a SIM card for connected services. That wraps up the front. Time to jump in the back and see what we have there. First impressions back here, I'm surprised by how much space there actually is. I'm 5'9", the driver's seat is set to my driving position, and there's plenty of room for my knees and head. In terms of seating, we get the same optional Napa leather seats back here as the front, good for 3 passengers and very comfortable. 3 adults in the back though would be a tight squeeze, and there is a fairly large drive shaft hump on the floor that robs you of floor space. There's ISOFIX points for the outboard seats and top tether mounts for baby or booster seats back here as well. The doors get the same suede look inserts as part of the S-Line package and brushed aluminium trim. Features wise, not much back here. You get vents for the rear passengers with a dedicated screen and buttons to set the temperature in the 3rd zone, a 12-volt power outlet, map pockets behind the front seats, bottle holders and storage in the doors, 2 very mechanical cup holders in the armrest that flip out, and storage under this lid, which is perfectly sized for a tablet, book or phone. So, now that we've covered everything here, all that's left to see is how this A4 drives. So, driving the Audi A4 S-Line. Now, at the start of this video, I mentioned that this particular car has the most powerful engine Audi dropped into the A4 lineup. It's a 185 kilowatt, 370 Newton meter turbo 4-cylinder. This car does also have Audi's all-wheel drive quattro system equipped. Now, from a consumption perspective, this thing will do 6.3 litres per 100 kilometers, which is pretty decent. If you ask me, compared to modern day standards, it still keeps up with the rest. What's amazing about this car is that in comfort and efficiency modes, it just cruises down the highway, no dramas. Stick this into dynamic mode though, which is Audi's equivalent of sport, and all of a sudden, it moves. And it moves in a way that it shouldn't, given this is just a base A4 at the end of the day. Audi released the S4 and the RS4 for those that are looking for a performance car. This shouldn't be this quick. Now, I think Audi's lied to us. I think this car doesn't do 0 to 100 in 5.8 seconds. I think it's quicker than that, which is a good thing if you ask me. You get a lot of performance out of this run-of-the-mill 4-door, 5-seat sedan. Now, Audi's also dropped some pretty decent brakes into this car. 4-piston calipers up front, single pistons in the back. They don't look very pretty, but they definitely bring this car to a grinding halt. And with this level of performance, I think you need those brakes, and they work really, really well. Then we have the transmission in this car. Audi's given us a 7-speed dual clutch transmission that works brilliantly. If you're in comfort or eco mode, the gear changes are really subtle. You can't really even feel the car changing gears. Stick it into dynamic and put the gearbox into sport by pulling the lever back once, and it certainly becomes a lot more aggressive and a lot more peppy. Having said that though, the only drawback I've found with this gearbox is when you do put it into gear initially, it takes a second to get going, but once you get going, the transmission shifts are pretty quick, especially if you put it into sport mode and you're using the paddle shifters. That's when you really notice how quick this gearbox really is. Suspension wise, this thing doesn't get adaptive dampers, nor did any of the A4s from this period of time, but to be honest with you, I don't think that's really an issue at all. The suspension in this car is really compliant, absorbs bumps and undulations really, really well, so much so that it gives you confidence to push this thing around corners really hard. Now, obviously having quattro in this car certainly helps with that as well. From a comfort perspective, it is really comfortable in here. The suspension is on the softer side, but you expect that given this is Audi's entry-level A4 and it is a mid-size family car. One thing to mention though is that the S-Line doesn't get a different suspension setup. It does have the same suspension setup as the rest of the A4 lineup. From a steering perspective, and being brutally honest here, it is a little vague. It doesn't really communicate what the front wheels are doing at all times, but I guess again that's not really too much of an issue for a car in this segment. It does change directions really quickly. It responds to steering inputs brilliantly, which I quite like, and certainly adds to giving you confidence around corners. In terms of being assisted, it is highly assisted in comfort or eco modes. You put it into dynamic, it does stiffen steering up a little bit, but that's really about it. In terms of driver assistance programs, this car doesn't have Audi's driver assistance package, as I mentioned before, which gives you adaptive cruise control, active lane keeping, and traffic jam assist. It does have automatic emergency braking, it does have blind spot monitoring, as well as cruise control, and also what Audi calls driver assist, which works hand in hand with the navigation system to tell you when you're coming up to the likes of a roundabout or an intersection. The car will tell you to lift your foot off the gas just to make sure you don't plow through those. So then, the Audi A4 is a fantastic proposition, especially if you consider that you can pick up one of these cars on the second-hand market for a shade over 25,000 Australian dollars and all the way up to 100 grand for a new car, again, excluding on-road costs. Now, the A4 is a really good balance between family car and a bit of sportiness. I love the subtle design of this car. It's unassuming, it doesn't stand out in a crowd, and like I said, it's for a person out there that wants this level of luxury and quality and even sportiness without standing out in a crowd. I certainly think that if you're in the market for a sedan these days, then you should definitely have a look at the A4 range, and in particular, have a look at the Audi A4 S-Line, because I think this car is a sheep that's going to surprise you.